Seattle in the final days of December carried a kind of atmosphere that was hard to define, cold, damp, and faintly sluggish, as if the entire city had wrapped itself in a thin blanket, torn between wanting to rest and needing to stay awake. In that moment, Nathan Cole, a 44-year-old man with silver already threading through his temples, stood before the worn mirror in his apartment, staring at his own reflection. Instead of the precisely tailored suit, tie, and polished shoes that defined his image as a CEO, today he wore a pair of gray work pants faded with wear, a cheap light blue button-down shirt, and plain sneakers. The faint scent of inexpensive synthetic fabric clung to the collar, along with the slight scratch against his skin, a reminder that this was not his usual role. 12 years earlier, Nathan had started out with a small mobile coffee cart down by the pier, where the steam from fresh lattes mingled with the salty breeze off Elliott Bay. From just a handful of regular customers, he had steadily built Harbor and Hearth into a chain of 42 locations across the West Coast. Along the way, he had always told himself his company would be different, not just selling coffee, but being a place where people were respected, where every cup was made with genuine care. Yet recently, internal reports from the Pike Street location in the heart of Seattle had unsettled him. Sales were still high, but anonymous feedback repeatedly mentioned lost work hours, burned-out employees, and an unusually tense work atmosphere. When Nathan brought this up at a meeting, a few regional managers simply smiled and brushed it aside with a joke. "Gen Z, you know they want high pay and constant praise." Laughter rippled around the table, but Nathan stayed silent. He knew numbers on a report could be polished, but the knot of unease in his gut couldn't be ignored. Years of hands-on experience making cappuccinos in the cold had taught him that when something was wrong, it would show not in revenue charts, but in people's eyes and behavior. That was why, on a gray afternoon, Nathan quietly walked into the Pike Street Cafe under the guise of a temporary janitor named Cal. The smell of roasted coffee filled the space, but woven into it was something else, a lack of warmth, a missing spark that he had once been proud of. Behind the counter, Bryce Turner, the 35-year-old manager with a polished look and easy smile, leaned against the counter scrolling his phone while barking orders to staff. Nathan quickly noticed one thing. Bryce only smiled warmly at high-profile customers or younger baristas who fit his taste, while his tone toward everyone else was cool, even laced with sarcasm. Amid this atmosphere, another face caught Nathan's attention, Emily Tran, 29, slender, hair neatly tied back, eyes focused. She moved seamlessly between the counter and the espresso machine, calling out each customer's order clearly, never forgetting a polite smile even when her hands were busy. Nathan noticed that the younger staff seemed to instinctively gravitate toward her during rushes, as if Emily was the anchor holding the place together. At around 3:15 p.m., an elderly man with white hair walked in, leaning on a cane. Emily greeted him immediately. "Your seat by the window is ready, Mr. Howard," guiding him to his usual spot with a small cup of black coffee. The gesture was simple, but it held a quiet dignity that made Nathan realize something that would never appear on a financial statement: quiet kindness. The shift ended, most customers had left, and Bryce was out the door almost immediately. But Emily stayed behind, cleaning overlooked corners, checking the espresso machine's pressure, then disappearing toward the manager's office. At first, Nathan thought she might just be helping out or doing extra work, but by the second night, he realized this was a pattern. Curious, he positioned himself nearby, pretending to mop the floor, and listened to the faint sound of a key turning. He caught a glimpse of the office door opening slightly, Emily kneeling to unlock the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, pulling out a thick envelope. She wasn't hurried, nor did she look like someone stealing. On the contrary, her movements were careful, almost reverent. The dim light caught her face, revealing an expression that blended fatigue with determination. After a few seconds, she slipped the envelope into her bag, locked the drawer, and walked out, smiling as she passed Nathan on her way out of the cafe. Standing alone in the now quiet space, Nathan felt a question rising inside him with no answer yet. Whatever was in that drawer didn't look like the spoils of a thief. It looked like a secret worth protecting. And that secret, he was certain, had everything to do with the real reason Pike Street, one of Harbor and Hearth's golden egg locations, was losing what had once made it special. The next morning, Seattle's rain fell in thin, silvery strands, glittering across the slick pavement like a sheet of glass. Nathan arrived at the Pike Street location earlier than usual, still wearing the same worn janitor's uniform with the Cal name tag neatly pinned to his chest. Amid the sound of chatter and the whir of coffee grinders, he blended easily into the flow of people getting ready for the morning rush. The mop in his hand served as the perfect shield, rendering him invisible to those too busy to notice the new cleaning guy. He spent the morning quietly observing Emily from a distance. She didn't run the shift like a manager, but the rhythm of the cafe seemed to turn around her presence. When a new hire fumbled with the espresso machine, Emily stepped in, not with scolding, but with a few precise pointers. When a customer frowned at a latte that didn't taste right, she replaced it without anyone needing to ask. There was something about her steady yet understated that Bryce, for all his authority, had never possessed. While Nathan was still watching, a young male voice called from behind the counter, "Cal, table 7 spilled some water." The voice belonged to Eli Rogers, a tall, lean barista with curly hair, about 24. Nathan nodded, went over with the mop, and when the job was done, Eli lingered beside him, half joking, half sincere. "You work hard. The guy before you used to hide in the back watching TikToks." Nathan smiled and asked quietly, "Been here long?" "Almost a year. Not bad, tips are decent. Customers are fine, except for some people." Eli's glance flicked toward the register, where a cluster of younger baristas laughed together. "Bryce's fan club. They get the best shifts, more breaks, but don't be stupid enough to cross him." Nathan gave a small nod, then asked casually, "What about Emily?" Eli's tone softened instantly. "She's different. Doesn't talk much, but she knows every regular. We call her the cafe's guardian angel. Once she caught someone skimming at the register, that's why Jenna, the one who used to work there, hates her." Throughout the day, little fragments of Emily's story fell into place. Marco, the weekend shift lead, recalled how last winter he'd almost been written up by Bryce for being late, but Emily had pulled security footage showing he'd been shoveling snow outside the cafe early that morning. Meanwhile, Jenna, the former cashier Emily had confronted, muttered bitterly, "She thinks she owns the place." Nathan didn't argue, but he filed away every word. Jealousy often ran deeper than any open accusation. By the end of the afternoon shift, Nathan's back ached from a day of mopping and constant movement, but the physical fatigue couldn't dull the way his mind was running faster than ever. He volunteered to take out the trash just so he could circle around through the back alley. From there, he spotted Bryce climbing into his BMW, laughing into his phone, not bothering to lock the back door. "Lock up when you're done, Cal," Bryce called out, tossing the keys to Emily, who was counting the till. Nathan returned inside, hearing the faint click of locks. Emily was still at the table, pen moving over figures, the warm overhead light pooling across her shoulders. "Need a hand?" he asked. She looked slightly surprised, then shook her head. "I'm fine. You can head out early." But Nathan stayed nearby, pretending to tidy up his tools. Before long, Emily slipped into the office again. This time, he waited 15 minutes, then quietly followed the hallway. He caught just enough of a glimpse to see her open the bottom drawer, counting through small bills exactly like the ones he'd watched customers drop into her tip jar all day. She placed them neatly into an envelope and wrote on it, "Maya V, week 14. Nathan pulled back quickly into the storage room, his pulse pounding. When Emily left, he moved to the drawer, using a bent paperclip, a trick from his early days doing surprise till checks when the company was still small. The lock gave way, and inside were dozens of envelopes, each marked with a week number and the name Maya V. He didn't need to open them to understand. Emily wasn't stealing. She was safeguarding something. And that name Maya V was a new question Nathan knew he had to answer. The next morning, Cal did not show up at the Pike Street location as usual. Instead, Nathan sat inside a rented sedan parked 2 blocks from the cafe, his laptop open on the passenger seat. Early rain clung to the windshield in a hazy film, catching the pale glow of the street lamps. He powered up the computer, logged into the company's top-level admin system, a level of access granted to only a handful of people, and skipped past all the familiar dashboards. Today there was only one goal: find Maya V. In less than 10 minutes, the full name appeared. Maya Velasquez, 31, a former shift lead at the Pike Street store. Her file showed she had been terminated 3 months earlier for violating cash handling policy. Nathan frowned. Any incident involving a cash discrepancy should have automatically triggered a formal audit, yet there was no trace of one. He dug deeper, pulling up her time cards and payroll records. Maya had never received her final paycheck, nor any severance. In the internal complaint archive, Nathan uncovered a document that had never been sent to HR, a draft complaint addressed directly to Bryce Turner. Its allegations were blunt. Bryce had deliberately cut staff hours so they wouldn't qualify for health benefits, and she had attached shift schedules matched against the system data as proof. Nathan read it 3 times, a cold sensation running down his spine. Within a week of that letter being written, Maya had been accused of being short over $150 in her till, then fired. When Nathan pulled up the register report from that day, the truth was even worse. 5 large transactions had been voided during Bryce's shift, a classic move to pocket cash without leaving an official trail. Everything lined up too neatly to be coincidence. As he prepared to close the laptop, one more file caught his eye, a scanned, handwritten letter from Maya that had never been sent. The writing was unsteady, yet resolute. She insisted she had no idea how the shortage had occurred, voiced her fear for her 5-year-old son Lucas, and ended with, "I used to think Harbor and Hearth cared about people, but now I'm not so sure." Nathan shut the laptop and checked the time, 3:15 p.m. If her routine held, Emily's shift would be ending soon. He started the car and rolled slowly toward the cafe, keeping far enough back to remain unnoticed. At precisely 3:42, Emily emerged from the employee entrance, a canvas bag slung over her shoulder, the daisy-painted tip jar nestled carefully inside. Instead of heading toward home, she walked in the opposite direction, crossing a few busy streets before turning into a small grocery store lit by a flickering neon sign. 20 minutes later, Emily came out carrying 2 heavy paper bags. Nathan followed from a distance, through streets that shifted from the bustling city center to the worn apartment blocks of Rainier Valley. The buildings bore peeling paint, rusted metal staircases, and windows filmed with grime. Emily stopped in front of a ground-floor unit, set the bags on the doorstep, tapped gently on the glass, and turned to leave. The door opened seconds later. A thin woman appeared, hair pulled up, her eyes watchful and wary. Nathan recognized her instantly. It was Maya Velasquez from the HR photo, though she looked smaller, more worn. From behind her, a young boy peeked out, clutching a plastic toy dinosaur. Maya bent to lift the bags, her expression softening as she looked at her son. Nathan stood in the shadows, his chest tightening. This was no longer data on a screen or figures in a report. This was a family barely getting by because a system had abandoned them, and only one person Emily had chosen not to turn away. That night, Nathan barely slept. The steady, persistent patter of rain against the apartment window became a metronome for the thoughts that refused to quiet. The image of Maya lifting the 2 bags of groceries, her eyes carrying both worry and gratitude, replayed over and over in his mind. He remembered the early days of building Harbor and Hearth when "every cup of coffee is served with purpose" wasn't just a slogan on the wall but something he believed in completely. Yet somehow, over the years of expansion, he had allowed his own system to become a place that could swallow someone whole simply for daring to speak the truth. The next morning, as he stepped into the Pike Street store, Nathan felt a sharp shift in the way he saw it. Everything looked the same, the soft gold light brushing the brick walls, the aroma of coffee mingling with the scent of fresh pastries, but the warmth that once lived here had been replaced by something colder, heavier. At the register, Bryce was entertaining a group of local influencers, his smile wide and voice full of charm. He enthusiastically took credit for the new menu boards, the seasonal promotions, even the barista favorites display a concept Nathan knew had come from Emily. Amid all this, Emily worked quietly as always, But Nathan noticed something new. Bryce's eyes followed her every move. The polite compliments he once tossed her way had turned into clipped, scrutinizing remarks. He hovered close when she served customers, inspecting every motion, and had recently scheduled her for both opening shifts at 5:30 a.m. and closing shifts the same evening, a deliberate exhaustion tactic Nathan had seen too many times in the industry. In a rare moment near the supply closet, Nathan asked Eli quietly, "Bryce seems on edge today." Eli shrugged. "He's in predator mode. Yesterday he made Emily redo an entire batch of cold brew, said it was bitter, even though everyone knew it was fine." Nathan frowned. "Any reason in particular?" Eli lowered his voice. "Word is, last week Bryce went through Emily's personal locker, said he was looking for evidence." The words made Nathan stop cold. He had assumed Bryce's suspicion was aimed at Cal, the new janitor, but it was clear now the real target was Emily, which meant she was holding something worth making him afraid. That afternoon, during the rush, it happened. The espresso machine suddenly lost pressure. The line of customers grew, and Bryce swooped in like a shark smelling blood. Who was the last person to pull a shot? All eyes went to Emily. "I followed procedure," she said, calm but firm. "Then why isn't it running?" Bryce snapped, before turning to reassure customers with a strained smile. "Guess we'll have to wait for the tech tomorrow." Nathan stepped closer and murmured to Emily, "Come to the stockroom with me." She hesitated, then followed. When the door shut, he said plainly, "I can fix it." Emily frowned. "You?" "I used to be a barista, back when Harbor and Hearth had only 3 stores. I've seen this exact issue. Bryce will be back in 10 minutes, so if we're doing this, it has to be fast." The hesitation in her eyes lasted only a few seconds before she nodded and left to keep him distracted. Nathan immediately pulled off the machine's side panel, careful not to trigger the safety sensor. Inside, he found the pressure valve deliberately misadjusted and a water line left loose, clear signs of sabotage. In just 7 minutes, he realigned and tightened everything, replaced the panel, wiped away any trace, and returned to his mop as if he'd never moved. 20 minutes later, Emily tested the machine and pulled a flawless shot of espresso. Bryce froze. "That's impossible." "Maybe it just needed a reset," Emily replied lightly. His eyes narrowed, suspicion tightening his face, but he said nothing more. In that look, Nathan could see something growing fear. Ever since the espresso machine incident, the air inside the cafe seemed to tighten another notch. Bryce no longer tossed casual teasing remarks at Emily, replacing them instead with subtle acts of retaliation. The pastry orders she needed for her morning shift were mysteriously forgotten in delivery, her bar station cleaning tools often vanished, and her personal locker was subjected to 3 random inspections in a single week. Each time, Bryce claimed it was for safety assurance, but his eyes carried a clear, unspoken threat. On payday, Emily stood by the notice board near the manager's office. One by one, everyone received their pay stubs or direct deposits, but when it came to her, nothing. She stepped into the office and asked plainly, "Where's my paycheck?" Bryce didn't look up from his phone, replying, "Strange, must have gotten lost in the mail." A faint, mocking smile played at his lips, the exact kind Nathan had seen whenever Bryce took credit for someone else's work. That night, after the store had closed, Nathan sat alone in the stockroom, phone in hand. He logged into the emergency payroll system, a tool reserved for storms, blackouts, or medical crises, and sent a direct deposit to Emily, adding a 15% compensation for processing error. He left the memo line blank, only wanting to ensure she'd have the money by morning. And as expected, the next morning Bryce was livid. He cornered Emily near the industrial fridge, his voice low but loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Looks like you filed a wage complaint. Don't play innocent. I know what you're doing. The logs, the envelopes, those little trips after hours. I'm not stupid." Emily met his gaze and replied evenly, "No one said you were." Nathan stood just a few steps away, mop in hand, feeling each word like a pinprick. Bryce leaned in, his tone sharper. "You want to know why Maya got fired? Because she was a thief who couldn't count past 20, And if you're not careful, you'll be next." The weight of his words sank into the room. Emily didn't lower her head. Her voice rang out steady and clear. "Maya didn't take anything. You framed her after she caught you skimming voiding transactions to pocket the cash and blaming it on a short till. You cut employees' hours so they wouldn't qualify for benefits. You buried her complaint. And now you're doing the same to me." Silence spread, broken only by the hum of the coffee grinder. Bryce tried to recover. "You can't prove that." "I can," Emily said, her tone calm but edged with steel. "And I will." She turned toward the office. Bryce's voice cracked as he followed. "Where are you going?" "To get the key. The drawer you've been trying to open for weeks." Nathan felt his blood heat. Every step Emily took now was a declaration. When Bryce grabbed her arm, his voice low and threatening, "You open that drawer, you're finished." Emily pulled free, her eyes unflinching. "If that's the price to end this, I'll pay it." And in that moment, Nathan knew he could no longer stand by. Nathan stepped forward, placing himself between Emily and the office door. She looked up, her eyes holding both surprise and urgency. "Cal, please move." He shook his head slightly, his voice low and steady. "I can't let you do this alone." His hand slid into his jacket pocket and came out holding a worn black leather wallet. When he opened it, the cafe's warm light caught on the gold-embossed badge of Harbor and Hearth the words, "Nathan Cole, Chief Executive Officer," clearly visible. The quiet murmur of conversation, the hiss of the espresso machine, even the gentle indie music playing through the speakers all seemed to stop at once. Bryce froze, the color draining from his face. What is this?" His voice cracked. Nathan didn't need to raise his tone. He spoke slowly, deliberately. "I think it's time I introduced myself properly. And the reason I'm here isn't to conduct a routine check, but to see exactly how this place operates when you believe no one is watching." At that moment, Carla Jensen, the regional director Nathan had quietly messaged earlier, stepped through the door. "Carla, may I have the master key?" Nathan said. Without hesitation, she handed over a gleaming silver key. Nathan led the group employees and curious customers alike into the cramped manager's office. The small space quickly felt crowded. Bryce stood back near the door, his breathing uneven. Nathan knelt before the file cabinet, slid the key into the bottom drawer and turned it. The soft click of the lock releasing seemed to echo in the thick, expectant silence. He pulled out a thick folder and set it on the desk. Inside, neatly clipped pages, voided transaction slips matching reports of till shortages, original work schedules compared against altered versions, emails from former employees who now understood the real reasons behind their departures. On top were brown envelopes, each labeled with a name, and a week 1 read, "Maya V, week 14. Nathan turned to the room. Emily Tran has been using all of her own tip money to help a former employee, Maya Velasquez, after she was wrongfully terminated, and she's been quietly collecting evidence of what's been happening here. Bryce tried to interject. "You can't possibly believe," but Nathan was already lifting a scanned copy of Maya's unsent letter from the folder. In this, Maya details how Bryce Turner voided transactions to pocket the cash and then blamed her for the shortage. She states clearly that she was told to leave immediately, with no review and no protection of her rights. Nathan raised his head and met Bryce's eyes. "Your employment is terminated effective immediately." Carla stepped forward, her tone crisp. "I'll escort you out and have all the safe codes changed today." Bryce's mouth opened as if to protest, but no words came. He gathered a few personal items and walked out past a row of employees whose eyes, this time, held no trace of fear. When the door shut behind him, Nathan let the silence settle for a few moments before turning back to the room. "I owe you all an apology. This company failed to protect you. Anyone who has lost hours, benefits, or wages will be fully compensated." His gaze stopped on Emily. "And to you, I owe a special thank you." When the office door closed, the noise from outside gradually faded. Only Nathan and Emily remained facing each other in the small room, the fluorescent light casting its pale glow across both their faces. Nathan pulled off his rubber gloves, set them on the desk, and spoke in a voice low but sincere. "I owe you an apology greater than to anyone else. You did what I should have done, stood up when the system stayed silent." Emily gave a small shake of her head. "I only did what was right." "No," Nathan replied. "You risked your job, your income, even your safety. That's not something everyone is willing to do." He paused for a moment, his gaze steady yet warm. "I want to offer you the position of manager for this branch. You've proven you deserve it." A flicker of surprise crossed Emily's face, but she shook her head almost immediately. "I appreciate it, but I didn't do this for a title. Maya lost her job, her home, everything, simply for speaking the truth. If you truly want to make this right, I want her reinstated, with full back pay and benefits, and I want the company to ensure this never happens again." Nathan looked at her for a long moment as if weighing the weight of every word, then he nodded slowly. "All right, I'll call Maya today." He extended his hand. Emily took it, the handshake firm, and without a single flourish, only the trust that had just been forged. Outside, the rest of the staff had already gone home in a mood entirely different from the one they'd arrived with. In that room, an agreement had been made not about titles or personal gain, but about a commitment called justice. 6 months later, Seattle's sky was a rare, clear blue, sunlight pouring down onto streets still carrying the faint scent of rain. Inside Harbor and Hearth's newly renovated headquarters in the heart of the city, everything looked worlds away from the cold, impersonal atmosphere of the past. The mirrored glass walls that once reflected the neighborhood like an unfeeling facade had been replaced with warm wooden doors and black-painted steel frames, creating the inviting sense of stepping into a vast coffee house. On the ground floor, a bar counter served coffee, staffed in rotating shifts by baristas from various branches alongside office employees. The invisible barrier between those who work and those who run things no longer existed. Nathan stood beside the counter, a hot cappuccino in hand, looking out across the open space where employees from every department had gathered for the launch of the Employee Protection Program. The idea had begun with Emily, but it had now become a company-wide policy. He still remembered that morning when Emily had refused the branch manager position and instead demanded that Maya be reinstated and that the entire employee protection process be overhauled. At the time, he'd thought it would be a long and difficult road, but now, seeing the eager faces in front of him, he knew it had been the right decision. Emily stepped onto the platform, no longer in a coffee-scented apron but in a dark blazer, her hair neatly tied back, her focused gaze still carrying the calm composure he knew so well. The name tag on her chest now read, Employee Advocacy Consultant. Nathan leaned toward her and whispered, "Nervous?" She smiled faintly and murmured, "A little, but this is a change we need." She began her speech, her voice clear and steady. "This program isn't here to create something revolutionary. It's simply something we should have had long ago, a system that reflects the values Harbor and Hearth was built on. Respect, accountability, and protecting the people who make this brand what it is." She outlined the core elements. An anonymous reporting channel that went directly to headquarters, bypassing local management. Surprise inspections from an independent audit team, an employee council with the right to consult directly with HR, and a requirement that any termination decision be reviewed by at least 2 independent levels of approval. As Emily spoke, Nathan scanned the room. Some managers shifted uncomfortably, perhaps recognizing themselves in the story. But many others nodded, eyes bright with agreement, perhaps because they had witnessed or endured similar injustices. Emily closed with a line that held the room in silence for several seconds before the applause came. "No one will be punished for doing the right thing ever again." Nathan slipped toward the door, leaving Emily to continue speaking with the managers. He had somewhere else to be. Just 15 minutes later, he stood in front of an apartment complex in Rainier Valley. But the site was different now, Fresh, light-colored paint, new railings, a secure entry system. Harbor and Hearth had purchased and renovated the building, keeping the rent the same so residents wouldn't be forced out. When Nathan knocked, Maya opened the door. Her hair was neat, her eyes brighter, her smile easier than before. "Hello, Mr. Cole," she said, her voice both respectful and warm. "Come in." Inside, the apartment was small but tidy and warm. The fridge door was covered in Lucas's drawings, now 6 years old, playing on the floor with a set of building blocks. "He still remembers you," Maya said. Lucas looked up, wide-eyed. "You're the coffee man, right?" Nathan chuckled. "That's right." The boy nodded solemnly. "Mom makes the best coffee ever." Maya explained that she had returned to work, this time in a regional training role. The steady schedule meant she could be home when Lucas finished school. "I'm grateful for this opportunity," Maya said. "But more than that, I'm grateful that someone believed me when everyone else turned away." Nathan was silent for a moment before he replied, "You and Emily taught me something: systems can fail, but people don't have to." As he left the apartment, Nathan felt something he hadn't in a long time: hope. The company had paid a price: compensation costs, renovation expenses, the time spent rebuilding trust, but revenue was rebounding, job applications were rising, and above all, employees were beginning to believe their voices mattered. Nathan's phone buzzed. A text from Emily read, "Meeting was a success. The managers agreed to implement right away. When are you coming back?" He smiled and replied, "On my way. I'm the afternoon barista today." Without disguise, without standing on the sidelines, Nathan stepped into the cafe with an apron tied in a hurry and his sleeves rolled up, ready to serve. In the sound of grinders and steam, he realized he had found what had driven him to start the business in the first place: not just selling coffee, but building a community that listens and looks out for one another. 7 months after the file drawer at the Pike Street branch was opened, Harbor and Hearth had changed in visible, lasting ways. The Employee Protection Program now operated across all 37 branches, each store with a trained peer representative ready to receive and relay concerns safely. New managers were required to complete a responsibility and transparency training program built by Emily and her team. Nathan kept his habit of spending at least one day each month working directly at a random branch. No longer arriving in secret wearing a janitor's uniform, he showed up as himself, sometimes as a barista, sometimes helping in the kitchen, and sometimes simply wiping tables and chatting with customers. Wherever he went, he noticed one common thing: employees spoke more honestly, and most importantly, no longer feared the consequences of doing the right thing. He still remembered his first time back at Pike Street after everything. The door opened and the familiar light and scent of coffee washed over him, but the feeling was completely different. There were no wary glances or hushed whispers when a manager entered, only natural greetings, laughter mingling with the hum of grinders. On the wall, the barista's favorite drinks board still hung in its usual place, but now with a small line underneath: "Idea by Emily Tran." Emily now worked at the Advocacy Center, an open corner of the headquarters office: no closed doors, no "do not enter" signs. The hotline connected directly to her desk and no one else. She had turned down the vice president title Nathan once offered, keeping only the role of consultant, because, as she had said that day at Pike Street, "I don't do this for a promotion. I do it so fairness is upheld." One afternoon, while Nathan was rinsing a milk-frothing pitcher after a shift at the Queen Anne branch, he caught his reflection in the polished steel surface. He was no longer the man grimacing in a cheap uniform with a collar that rubbed against his skin, but someone who had been reminded through the story of a barista and a former employee that leadership is not just about running a business, but about protecting it. He thought about the drawer from that day, not only for what was inside, but for what it meant. Every company has drawers like that, places where hard truths are kept, locked away not always out of malice, but because no one wants to be the one to open them. Emily had opened it, and because she did, he had too. When his shift ended, Nathan said goodbye to the new baristas and stepped out into the street. The Seattle evening stretched in a soft orange glow. His phone buzzed a message from Maya. Lucas started first grade. He told the coffee man he's practicing making a heart shape in milk. Nathan smiled. The company's revenue had stabilized. Customer ratings were at their highest in years, but for him, the true achievement was something numbers could never measure. Employees knew their voices mattered, managers had learned to listen, and there was always someone watching not to catch mistakes, but to protect. Because some drawers don't hold guilt, they hold proof that someone still believes in what's right. And sometimes, all it takes is one person brave enough to open it. From the perspective of someone who has studied and worked alongside businesses for many years, I believe the true strength of an organization does not lie in grand marketing strategies or impressive profit reports, but in how they protect their people when no one is watching. A solid process is necessary, but it is the individuals who dare to stand up that ensure fairness truly exists. Emily did that. Nathan listened. And the entire company changed. If you also believe that integrity never goes out of style, leave a comment with the 3 words, "Open the drawer," as a reminder to all of us that sometimes a single act of courage can change an entire system. Don't forget to hit like to support meaningful stories, subscribe so you won't miss the journeys ahead, and join us as we continue to open the drawers of truth still locked away out there.